Welcome back to the Behind the Net podcast. As always, I'm one of your two co-hosts, Matthew, and joined with me today is my other co-host, Michael.
Hi guys, how's it going? This is episode 42, and that's the Tyler Bozak episode. Pouring one out for the homies.
Oh yeah, for sure. Again, Tyler Bozak is a great Toronto Maple Leaf, at least in this recent decade. That's a great choice. I'm pretty sure
one of the most underrated players. On the Leafs.
We got to keep this trend going. I think next week's is pretty easy as well.
Oh
yeah. There's actually two Toronto players, or one former and one current Toronto athlete that we could use for next year. Next week.
Yes.
But anyways, welcome back, and a pretty eventful week. I mean, sports are just going crazily right now. Last week, our episode was right before the Raptors Game 7. And by the time you're hearing this, unfortunately, now the Toronto Raptors have been eliminated from the playoffs after falling in Game 7 to the Boston Celtics. I just want to know what you think, Michael. Before we get into that, I just want to introduce that we do have a great guest on very shortly in William Liu, the lead reporter from Yahoo Sports, the lead Toronto Raptors reporter, and we went more in depth on the Toronto Raptors and that. But before we get into that, I just want to know what were your initial reactions on that Game 7?
Well, first I want to preface that just after the Game 7 last week, me and Matthew did a post-game recap on the game itself, where we did a video interview with ourselves. If you haven't checked that out, please do so. It should be on YouTube. I'm sure. I think we'll put a link in the description of this podcast if you're interested in listening to that. But I mean, at the time, frustrated. You're excited that this Raptors team had a lot of potential, and they almost realized it, and they nearly pushed one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference to the limit, and we're a couple possessions shy of taking the win. I mean, we obviously remember that Norman Powell shot that got blocked in the last couple of seconds that could have changed the factors of that game. And honestly, you have to give the nod to this Raptors team, because they could have easily, I've said this many times, they could have easily keeled over and had one of their worst seasons in a long time after losing a big star like Kawhi. But they used his departure as motivation, and look at where they are now. They're in a really good spot, and who knows what the future holds for them.
For sure. And like you said, make sure you check out our post-game mini podcast and let us know what you think about those. We might be doing more, hopefully, if the Blue Jays go to the playoffs, or on special games where we react. But yeah, go check that out, because that's our true immediate reactions. But I'll just give a summarized reaction of mine. I think it really stung for Raptors fans this year, because, it's almost like this whole season we really built it up where there's no expectations. They're exceeding all our expectations. Things are going great. But it's almost like in doing that, we did kind of build expectations for ourselves. And Raptors fans were just thinking, hey, I mean, if they're doing this great, they really can be, a contending team. They can really go all the way, and they really could have. But, Raptors fans should be happy with the outcome regardless. And I mean, we'll talk about it later, but in the episode. But as of recording this right now, the Clippers were eliminated. So Kawhi Leonard left for the Clippers, got this exact same result as the Toronto Raptors. So it makes you think. I think this team is in good hands, and they kind of beat themselves up in Game 7. A lot of the mistakes were self-inflicted, a lot of turnovers. Pascal Siakam's offensive woes. Again, Pascal Siakam has been taking way too much slander, though, online. He's been elite defensively during that series. He just couldn't get his shots to go in. And he'll bounce back. I'm pretty sure he'll bounce back next season, given some good time to train properly. He missed out on a lot of time, but this team's in good hands, and we'll have to see how it unfolds. Other than that, before we get right into the interview, Michael, anything happened this week? Anything of note?
Honestly, this week was my first week back in school, which has been quite a long time. The last time I was taking classes was towards the end of April. It's been quite a few months off since then. Quite a lot's changed for me personally, as you know, and as I mentioned in the podcast on previous episodes. But it's good to be back in school. It was definitely weird to be on campus that was empty and all the social distancing rules. But honestly, just to see my friends again was awesome. So, what about you?
Awesome. I mean, not much. I'm just continuing doing work and just chilling at home. Really. Things are going good though. Yeah. So I think with that, we'll go right into our interview with William Liu, the lead Toronto Raptors reporter for Yahoo Sports, and we'll go into that now. Today on the podcast, we're pleased to be joined by William Liu, the lead Toronto Raptors reporter for Yahoo Sports and the host of the Raptors Over Everything podcast. Before joining Yahoo, William also wrote for Raptors Republic. Welcome to the show, William. How are you?
I'm great, guys. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, awesome. No problem, man. Thanks for coming on to talk Raptors with us.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I do for the majority of my time. So.
Of course. Of course.
That's true.
So let's just get right into it. Like looking at the year in review, I know you wrote a piece about remembering this season's Toronto Raptors. So can you just tell us what makes this year's Toronto Raptors so special?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, first off, as Raptor fans, it's not very often where they go to the playoffs and you feel proud about how they did. Obviously it's the last 2 years, it's been a different story with the championship and then this last series, but you just don't usually feel that proud. And I felt like this team kind of set the bar for like what the future iterations of the Raptors need to be, in the sense that I'm like very much overseeing like the mid 2000s Raptors, even the early 2010s Raptors, like teams that, would finish like 29th in defense, or like we would be desperate to make the 8th seed or anything, like that. Like this is kind of the standard. You have a team that plays defense first. Everyone on the rotation was a really good defender, and also a team that kind of played together, shared the ball, and honestly just played with that sort of like passion and fight that previous teams didn't have. Like, I mean, obviously previous teams weren't defending the championship, didn't have as much talent maybe, or as much experience, but like this team, there's a lot of stuff that you can replicate moving forward. And I felt like, this should be that sort of golden standard. Like, yeah, no, they didn't win the championship, but they didn't really have the talent to necessarily contend for a championship, but they made the most of what they had. They played, a really smart brand of basketball. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sort of seeing more teams like this one.
Absolutely. Would you say that the loss of Kawhi makes this team all the more impressive, just what they were able to accomplish in spite of not winning a championship?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. But I think it's, if you even compare it to a couple of years ago, I think you just lost a substantial amount of offensive talent off of this team. And so sort of without that traditional number one go-to guy, obviously with Pascal underperforming and Kyle doing it at times, in that Celtics series, which is very impressive, but Kyle's historically not really a number one type of scorer that sort of carries the rest of your team. That was the part that was really the most impressive, was because if you just look at the scoring talent on the team, it wasn't that high, and ultimately their offense was the reason why they lost, not necessarily their defense, which is still good. But yeah, I mean, I think it's impressive that they not only that they competed sort of despite sort of the lack of scoring talent, but also it was impressive that they competed because they had many chances to stop doing so, right? Like even after last year, without Kawhi, you could make the argument of the team going in a different direction, right? And the general manager and the president decided not to do it. You have Kyle Lowry, you have Serge Ibaka, you have Marc Gasol. Those three guys would all have been great. Didn't trade any of them, kept the team together. They wanted to compete, and they built this great defense. And even when you go to the playoffs, you're down 0-2. You're down 2 with 0.5 seconds left in Game 3, and for them to flip that game around, to compete in Game 4, to win Game 6 in double overtime, I think it's just impressive to see that kind of quality and that character. Because if you look around the league, like a lot of teams don't really compete that hard. I would say very, very few teams actually know how to compete hard. That's a skill and that's a talent. And the Raptors had that talent and that skill this year. So that was what's most impressive to me. And of course, when you lose Kawhi, what did he do? Like, basically Michael Jordan records in terms of his scoring and his defense. Like, yeah, you're going to suffer. But, as I wrote in that story, the Raptors won in spite of his absence a lot more than they lost because of it. And that's just hard to say, because if you look at a lot of other franchises that have lost a star player, the Warriors with Kevin Durant, of course, they have injuries this year, but still, they went from in the finals to the worst record in the NBA. If you look at LeBron leaving Cleveland twice, both times after they left, Cleveland went from like a 60-win team to a 20-win team. And with Kawhi leaving, the Raptors actually had a better win percentage in the regular season this year, which is just kind of incredible.
Absolutely.
For sure. Go ahead.
Just basically just going to say it's crazy just to think of how much of an impact the loss of like a number one talent can be. Like I know for hockey, we talk about the Islanders losing Tavares and look at the situation now. But for the Raptors, I think what's more impressive is they maintained this identity throughout, even when Kawhi was a Raptor. That defense first mentality has still been there, and they've had success. Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, this whole season, we've been saying all season, but it's almost like a magical wild card season that has just exceeded expectations the entire way. And I completely agree with you in the sense that this team should be seen as the premier team for hustle and heart, especially, and beating the odds. And of course, last year's expectations were to win a championship with Kawhi Leonard on a rental contract basically. And this year was more like, there was no expectations, but they were still able to almost compete as if they had the exact same expectations. So, I mean, I agree with you right there.
I was going to say, if we're talking about last year, there was plenty of moments that we look back on very fondly. I think I can think of one shot with 4 bounces that immediately comes to mind. But in terms of this year, what were your favorite moments covering the Raptors, and are there any funny stories you'd like to share?
I mean, I think a lot of them, really. Like, this is the first year I was consistently in the building every single game. I mean, I guess last year in the playoffs too, but this year, yeah, I mean, Raptors game, they're at home, seeing the atmosphere, just around. And you know what it is? Actually, the biggest thing was seeing the difference in confidence for the fan base, because basically up until that Kawhi shot, it felt like everyone kind of expected things to go wrong for the Raptors, because that's historically what happened. There's just a lot of unfortunate things happen to the Raptors. Vince Carter gets a semi-open look in 2001, and he misses that shot, and the Raptors lose. It just so happens he's graduating that day, so obviously a lot of things going on, unfortunately, there in terms of timing. And then you get the number one pick. That first pick turns into Andrea Bargnani. When you think about the average number one pick being pretty much an all-star, at least very, very good chance to go to the Hall of Fame. When you have the number one pick, the one time you get it, it's Andrea. And, you just have a lot of unfortunate moments. And so the change in the fan base is sort of going from it's a franchise that mostly despairs to one that is really hopeful and feels very confident in every scenario was great. I think the prime example of that was early December, maybe late December, but Raptors playing the Mavericks. They're down 30 after 3 quarters essentially, and the Raptors fans, everyone just stood there, everyone just stayed, and Kyle Lowry hit a 3, people got excited, and it was honestly a couple years ago, if you go back a decade, that game would be not nearly as well attended, but also just there wouldn't be that same hope. People would be leaving to beat traffic or whatever. And the Raptors obviously pulled that upset off. That was a ridiculous game. I remember the Philly game, the first one where the Raptors played Philly, Embiid held scoreless in that game. That game was phenomenal. Just hearing how delirious the fans were after Embiid missed the free throw, because he was still stuck on 0. And the Sixers got 3 seconds in the key kind of thing. So they got a free throw shooter. And they sent Embiid there. Usually it wouldn't be Embiid, but they sent Embiid just to get him off the off the streak of scoring, being scoreless, and he still missed that shot. And the reaction from the fan base was incredible. So Josh got basically he flopped to get 3 free throws, I think, against Terence Davis, and somehow, even though he's an 82% free throw shooter, he missed all 3. The fans were just incredible throughout this entire season. That's one of the biggest regrets of this year not being played out, in a regular NBA environment. Is just, the Scotiabank Arena atmosphere is just been incredible, and it's a tangibly missing part of what makes the Raptors great. But the rest of the stuff is just, it's a fun team. I really enjoy, covering the team. I'm not like going to pretend like I'm going to be friends with any of these guys. I'm really not. But, getting to sit down with Fred VanVleet, he's a really, really great interview. He's a really cool guy, chatting with Pascal, chatting with Mark, sitting down with Nick Nurse. Like, there's just a lot of interesting people with interesting stories, very generous with their time. And, it's just a good group of guys. Like, I think I'm going to miss the personalities on this team if any of them decide to move on, because it was just a really good mix.
For sure. Yeah, it was definitely just a great team all around, and it must have been awesome just covering them. But our next question is, we just want to get actually into the basketball talk here, and we're nearly a week removed from the Raptors playoff exit. And in your eyes, what went wrong in their series against Boston?
They couldn't score. That's what it is. Raptors were kind of an average offense in the regular season. A lot of it was transition. They were really, really dominant in transition. And then the Celtics, they were just, a bad matchup, A, because they were really good at defending in transition, and B, they're just a really good defensive team as a whole. And I think actually losing Gordon Hayward helped them defensively a little bit. But, it's just their main guys couldn't come out and deliver and score, right? The 3, leading guys on the Raptors, Kyle, Fred, and Pascal, only one of those guys really scored at their level, which is Kyle. Fred scored a lot, but also shot the ball with inefficient numbers. I can't totally blame him for that, to be honest. He had a lot of late shot clock situations, although that last shot in Game 7 was kind of painful. And then Pascal, like, straight up, it's not all on Pascal, but Pascal was just so far below his level that it just dragged down the rest of the offense in general. And then there's other things you can point to of, like, the Raptors bench, even though they won a lot of games this year with the bench, Nick Nurse didn't ultimately trust anybody off the bench, essentially. Norm took too long to sort of make his impact on the series. Serge, for some reason, didn't play that much, even though he was actually one of the few Raptors making his shots. And then all these other guys, Matt Thomas got a bit of like 5-minute runs in the Game 6 and 7, but ultimately he wasn't going to go to Chris Boucher or Rondae Hollis-Jefferson or Terence Davis, guys that had contributed in the regular season. And, if you were heading into the series, you would have thought, okay, the Raptors have an advantage in depth. They have 7 guys, at least 7 guys that you can play. And it turned out not really to be the case. So it's just offensively, I think that was the biggest thing. It's just they didn't have enough. When you have literally zero from Marc Gasol, he's not giving you anything. And then Pascal also plays so far below his level. Fred shoots inefficiently. It's just very, very tough. And the fact that they were even in a position where they were down 2 with Norman Powell streaking in transition, getting blocked by Marcus Smart in the final minute to force a tie, that just tells you how great they were defensively. But yeah, offensively, they just didn't have enough, man.
For sure. And it's a lot of things that, a lot of people have identified, but I got to ask you for sure, especially a lot of the criticism has went towards Pascal Siakam, obviously, kind of the assumed number 1 player because of the contract he was given. But I got to ask you, what do you think this kind of playoff series means for Siakam? Is the ceiling still just as high for him, or has it changed?
It's look, okay, first off, I feel really bad that he's taking this much criticism. I think by no means is Pascal the only one at fault here.
For sure.
Like, yeah, Pascal's not scoring nearly as well as he should have, but that's not the only reason the Raptors lost. The Raptors lost as a team. Like, it's unfair to single them out.
For sure.
And it's also just straight up unfair that there's like all these like racist petitions out against them. I don't even understand that.
Oh yeah, those are
hatred.
Those are the worst. Like, honestly, side note, like Pascal Siakam does not deserve any of the slander that's been
No.
going towards him at all. And like, yeah, we're just trying to obviously bring more positivity towards him because his potential is still there. But I gotta, of course, ask you, like, do you think this changes anything in terms of his ceiling?
I don't think it changes necessarily in his ceiling. I think he needs to continue developing the way he's currently developing. I think a lot of star players sort of take a hit. I think it depends on what your thought on his ceiling was to begin with. If you thought he was going to be one of these Kawhi level type players, I didn't think he would ever get to that level because it's not even necessarily pessimism. I just don't think that there's that many players out there like on that level, right? To be the number one guy on a championship team. How many guys in the league can you really say that about? You know, like Kawhi, Kevin Durant, LeBron, and Steph. That's it. That's the only 4 guys. Even a guy like James Harden can't do it. Guys like Paul George can't do it. You know, there's a lot of great stars. Giannis can't do it, right? A lot of these other guys can't do it. There's 4 of these people. And I didn't think Pascal's ceiling was ever that high, but I think Pascal, obviously he's a growing player. He's been developing a skill set. It's just the skill set wasn't sharp enough for one reason or another to make an impact, to make the kind of star level in this playoff series against Boston. And so whether that's because there was a long layoff or whatever it is, I just think that he's going to continue working on that skill set. And really it's just things like his handle needs to get better, needs to get tighter. You know, his shot needs to get more consistent. He can continue. He's an all-star this year, an all-star, and it's really just taking that leap from being in the regular season to being really effective in the playoffs as a number one guy. Because even though he was a game taken away, you can't spin because literally everyone in the league knows you're going to spin. You got to sometimes you got to beat 2 defenders, sometimes you got to beat smaller defenders, bigger defenders, very the cream of the crop kind of defenders like Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown. You know, you're going to have shot protection at the rim. People are going to show you zones. You got to be really developed and really honed as an offensive player to succeed in that environment. And you know, it's very clear Pascal's not sharp enough at the moment.
It's really tough for him to like adjust to that number one role, especially so soon after losing Kawhi. And I know a lot of Raptors fans were having high expectations because coming off a championship season, there's like this mentality like, oh, this team can do anything. And as you were saying earlier, the confidence level in the fan base was very high. So, and to be fair, he did live up to those expectations a lot during the regular season, but it's hard to really pinpoint what exactly caused him to struggle in the playoffs. But I mean, I want to give credit to the Raptors team as a whole because even though offensively they didn't really give it like a consistent effort, like you could probably agree with me in the sense that Boston really did a good job of neutralizing them in some areas. But in spite of Siakam's struggles, they were able to make that series go to Game 7.
Yeah, and that's all defense. That was all defense. I mean, you look at games like Kemba Walker had a game where he played 51 minutes in Game 6. And scored 5 total points. And it's like, Kemba's really freaking good. He is really deadly. And the Raptors were just able to scheme. And that's where you see the difference in the quality of a guy like Jason Tatum, because the Raptors threw more stuff defensively at Tatum than what the Celtics ended up throwing at Siakam. And even despite that, Tatum was still able to be effective and play around that and find different ways to score. That's when you know you've really leveled up, when you can succeed in a playoff environment against a really talented defensive club. But the Raptors really made life tough for them. They made life so tough for them. And honestly, the Raptors made a lot more clutch plays, right? Because honestly, you know, if Norman Powell makes that layup, which, you know, it's really like a fraction away from being a layup, or at least he's a fraction away from getting it on the backboard, and that would have been called an goaltending. There was a goaltending early in that game. Whatever. If the Raptors somehow won Game 7, I don't think they deserve to, but if they had won Game 7, all people will be talking about is the fact that Boston didn't score a single basket in Game 7 for the last 5 minutes of the game. They didn't have a single field goal for 5 minutes. And people will be, slamming the Celtics for choking, slamming them for missing 10 free throws, and being unable to capitalize on a Raptor team that clearly wasn't at their best. And a lot of that just comes down to defense. Like the Raptors, just like they gave the Celtics hell. And the Celtics are really great. That's how I know the Celtics are really great, because I know the Raptors, through the entire book, at Boston, and eventually they won by one possession. So it is what it is,
Exactly.
Exactly.
I think defense is most definitely a huge positive takeaway from this entire series, and also just the playoffs in general, just how well the Raptors defense was. I want to ask you though, what other positives do you get out of this playoffs, and who impressed you the most?
I think Fred had a really nice playoffs. Even in that Celtics series, I know Fred didn't shoot the ball that efficiently. It was probably around like 35% as a field goal percentage, which you would say, wow, that's terrible. But I mean, considering how much shot creation he had to do and had to take on because Pascal was struggling so much, and sort of also what he did defensively to Kemba in that series, I thought Fred had a really nice playoff run because I mean whatever the Nets series is whatever, that was basically a G League team, but Fred was pretty good, and Fred was the Raptors' leading scorer in the playoffs. And yeah, he shot the three well. He defended really well. We all knew that, and he played heavy minutes. He showed an ability to compete. I think he found ways to impact the game on and off the ball, which is pretty impressive. And there's things that he can't really make layups unless he gets, if he's driving one-on-one against the guy and he puts a shoulder into him, maybe he makes that layup. But if there's any help at the rim or anything like that, he's probably missing just because of his size. But Fred was awesome. I mean, I thought Fred was, incredible in the playoff run. And then I guess OG as well. Not that necessarily OG showed you a completely new skill set or anything like that, but the confidence in which OG approached, especially that Celtics series, hitting that game winner and then saying, I don't shoot trying to miss, that was actually his mentality throughout this entire Celtics series, where you would have thought, okay, the Celtics have great defenders, he might struggle, but OG was very confident in his role, even though he was like a fourth man, fourth option. He would go behind his back, pull up for jumpers, spin move, dunk on people, get in there for offensive rebounds. And of course, defensively, we all knew OG was really good, but damn, OG was really good. He's probably the only guy in the Raptors that could guard, Jason Tatum one-on-one consistently and not allow him to get a shot off. So yeah, those two, OG and Fred.
So I just want to ask you, let's talk about OG a little. How much more of a step do you think he could take in his career? How much higher is the ceiling, do you realistically think?
I think the big limiting factor right now is his handle. I don't think he can get to the spots that he wants to get to on the floor. And I think that's always going to hurt you as an offensive player. It means you can't really run pick and rolls. It means sometimes he'll get steals on the fast break, but he can't necessarily get separation and finish clean at the rim. Maybe he gets fouled instead because his handle just slows him down. And yeah, so I think he needs to sharpen up the handle. And I think if he can do that, then a lot of the other stuff, I think he actually has the skill set to do some, the 3-point shooting. He is a pretty good 3-point shooter. I don't know what to say. When you watch him at practice like that, he's pretty money. He's working a lot on sort of coming off a pick and roll, running a pick and roll. It looks really slow when he does it, but I think there might be some development there. And honestly, it's just a handle, because I think everything else he has a good sense of. Defensively, he's really good. Offensively, he could have a little better awareness in terms of sometimes he collects an offensive rebound and there's 3 guys around him and he still tries to finish. So maybe that offensive awareness is something that could improve. But at the same time, he's also a surprisingly decent passer. For a guy who doesn't have the ball that much, he makes good decisions with the ball. So it's really that handle. If you can get that handle, and then if he can get some semblance of an off the dribble game, whether that's defenders going under the screen, he's going to pull up, or get to the mid range and pull up. We've seen it occasionally, but definitely not nearly enough that it will even make a scouting report, let alone be a consistent option for him. But he's also mad young. That's the thing. He's younger than rookie Terence Davis, which always shocked me. I know there was the stories that came out this year of TD and OG used to play on the same AAU team. And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. OG's super young. And maybe Terrence is a little old for a rookie, but OG is just still so early in his development. And for him to already be able to perform in the playoffs, for him to already be a really good 3-and-D guy, the floor is already so high for him. So the ceiling is just whatever he wants to make of it. If he can get that handle down, he could be a very scary player.
For sure. And then my next question is, of course, today, Nick Nurse received a multi-year contract extension. I just want to know your quick initial thoughts to that decision by the Raptors.
I think it's good. I mean, I think it's good. I mean, look, the Raptors still need to, extend Masai and Bobby Webster and keep the front office in charge. But I think one of the strengths of the Raptors organization is great leadership, right? You got Kyle on the floor, you got Nick on the sideline, and you got, Masai and Bobby at the top. And having strong leadership is the number one key to having success in any sort of organization, not just sports. But yeah, Nick deserved it, man. Nick absolutely deserved it. And honestly, I'm just really happy for the guy because it feels really fitting that the Raptors would have a coach like Nick. Because you look at the team, it's like late first round picks like Kyle, Serge, OG, Pascal. Those guys are all late first round picks. You got Norm and Marc Gasol. Those guys were second round picks. Fred was undrafted, Terence Davis undrafted, Chris Boucher undrafted, Matt Thomas undrafted. Like that's like the whole rotation is like everybody is just had to beat the odds. And Nick Nurse is essentially an undrafted coach. Like you have like first round picks like Steve Nash, who, all right, I want to coach. I was a legendary player. I'm going to get a coaching job. Whereas for Nick Nurse, this man had to coach like all across the world, man. This guy would tell stories about how he used to coach in Belgium. And since his team was first division and he had to sometimes play a fourth division team, that fourth division team would be spotted a 30-point lead just at the start of the game. It'd be 30-0 to start. And then his team would still win. And Nick also has like a, he should, honestly, I would read a biography of Nick Nurse because I would want to know all these little small details of how he used to drive the van for this like semi-professional basketball team in Oklahoma. So he was the coach and he also had to drive the van. Like that's how small the operation was. Or, one of my other favorite Nick Nurse stories is that he coached against Masai Ujiri as a player. Like Masai was playing in England because Masai was apparently not a very good basketball player. And Nick Nurse was literally coaching against the guy who would eventually become his boss and hand him this extension. And so Nick is a guy who's had to absolutely grind. It's made him a really good coach. And he's been fantastic in his 2 years. I think, more than anything else, the way he's approached the job has been really refreshing in that, he's willing to be really creative. He's introduced a lot of wacky ideas, right? Like I don't see a lot of teams running box and one before Nick Nurse came along. I don't see a lot of teams full court pressing for extended periods until Nick Nurse came along. I think he's just really refreshing that he's willing to call out his players. Like the only guy he's not going to call out is Kyle Lowry, obviously, because there's nothing really to call out with Kyle, and no coach wants that smoke with Kyle Lowry. But he will call out everybody. He'll call out Pascal. He'll call out Norman Powell. What did Rondé and Stanley Johnson? He told you from day one that these guys weren't very good. So I kind of really enjoy that about Nick.
Yeah. And I love how you put it. I think Nick Nurse is definitely the perfect embodiment of Raptors culture, almost that next man up mentality, that, work hard and grind and get to where you are mentality that, the Raptors have always shown in their players. And the fact that, last year there were no lottery picks in the on the roster, and then this season as well. He just perfectly represents that. So that's an amazing point.
Exactly. And the stats speak for themselves. I'm just looking at it right now. A .721 win percentage in the regular season, a .657 win percentage in the playoffs, and obviously the NBA championship and all his other accolades at every other level. The man's a great coach, and he deserves to be where he is. And it's really refreshing to see Raptors lock up who's arguably going to be the best coach in Raptors history. That's a hot take, but I stand by it.
I mean, it's not listen, the bar is low, man. We've had some bad coaches. And Nick already has more playoff wins than any other Raptors coach. Like Dwayne Casey coached there 6 years and got 22 wins, and Nick Nurse is already at 23. So, yeah. I mean, obviously he had Kawhi for that year, and he's had a really talented roster the last 2 years. But still, it's only 2 playoff runs.
Oh, for sure. So my next question is, our next question is basically, do you sense a similar extension from Masai coming soon?
I think so. Yeah, I do. First off, actually, I don't have any inside information on this, so this is just really my opinion. And then also B, I have to really add the caveat that in a post-COVID world. It's hard to sort of anticipate these things. I will say that I don't think MLSE is short on money. I don't think Rodgers and Bell are short on money. As far as things hit by COVID, for example, like you can look at Houston. Okay, you have Tillman Fertitta. He runs casinos and restaurants. That's going to be hit hard. He might be weary to spend money. As far as I know, we are still looking at our phones and going on the internet. So I'm pretty sure Rodgers and Bell are doing just fine financially, despite the an otherwise global recession. But yeah, I mean, I think first off, A, they have the money, and B, these guys just deserve it. Like Masai and Bobby, it's proven to be a great leadership tandem, the two of them together. Obviously, a lot of teams have approached the Raptors to sort of talk to Bobby Webster about their head coach and so forth. But yeah, they deserve it. And honestly, I think they probably want to stay. I mean, what is the big? I mean, if Bobby gets a job to run an organization somewhere and it's a good situation, I could see them taking it for sure, right? Because I think everyone wants to be that to take on that challenge. But at the same time, like he has a great situation here. His kids were born here, just like Masai's kids, were born here, and they have roots here. They've built a really good program here, and there's not a great reason to leave. And there's there's rumors that other teams want to go after Masai. That's great, man. I mean, it's great to be wanted, but I think Masai has a really great relationship with ownership, and yeah, I mean, some of the Knicks stuff that comes up, and the Knicks hired Leon Rose, so it seems like that's settled for now. I don't think that's really much of a scare there. It seems like Washington was another room for a team interested in Masai. Seems like they have also made a decision there, and they're sort of letting their GM stay on and sort of make pretty key decisions, in terms of like not trading Bradley Beal, for example. So it seems like, I don't see a big competitor out there with a job better than the Raptors. And again, MLSE has plenty of money. The Raptors have made them a lot of money over the years. The Raptors seats they're probably like 5 times as expensive as they used to be. And a lot of that is Masai. So pay these guys, and I kind of expect them to get paid at this point. I think we'll see extensions for them sometime soon.
I always find it funny that like almost immediately after the Raptors won a championship, a news report comes out, oh, the Wizards want to take Masai. And then literally in the middle of this year, the Knicks want to take Masai. I feel like next year it's just going to be insert team wants to talk to Masai. It's just going to be an endless cycle. I don't know. You're right. It doesn't make sense for him to leave. Like it's a great situation.
Yeah. Why would he want to leave what he's already built here so that he can go to New York, where that's like a famously fickle market, or like going to Washington? And their reasoning for going to Washington was like, okay, they might offer him a slice of ownership, which honestly, if that's the case, I can't blame Masai for doing that, because obviously sports franchises are incredibly lucrative. But I didn't think that was actually realistic, and I don't think that actually happened, and that was on the table. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. They're always trying to say like, oh, Masai could, go to New York, and that's where the United Nations is. One of their headquarters is there, and he can build connections. It's like, we see Masai, at games with Barack Obama, or hosting Justin Trudeau. Like, listen, if you have 2 G7 leaders, just like regularly, you're meeting with them, or you're going to Kenya to help establish, Kenyan Canadian political ties. Like, I think Masai does fairly well for himself politically. I don't think he needs to necessarily go to Washington so that he could be near the White House, man.
For sure. I mean, I guess when you're the champs, I guess everyone just wants to take a piece of that pie, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look at how many people get hired out of the Spurs, right? The front office, like Sean Marks is now somewhere else. Right, you see the coaches that they produce. Like, this is what happens to great franchises. You shouldn't sweat it.
Okay.
Oh yeah, of course.
So since we're talking about Masai, he's got a lot of decisions to make during the offseason. The big 3 obviously are Ibaka, Gasol, and Lowry. So what do you think is going to be happening to the aforementioned players in regards to whether or not they're going to stay?
Yeah, I think you meant Fred instead of Kyle, right?
Yeah, Fred.
I mean, we also mean, obviously Lowry's kind of departure is less rumored and it's not as big thing. But I guess that's more of a result of how the direction of the team ends up going. So
Yeah.
I think we include him in that question in a sense, but not as in the immediate market, you know?
Yeah. It's just more of an umbrella statement anyway.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, with the free agents, like, I think I don't really know what you do at center. I think that's a really tricky situation because I don't really feel great about paying these guys. I mean, Mark looks really done offensively, and even though I think he's still a really good defensive player, absolutely, he brings so much on that end. It's just he brings so little offensively that it starts to really hurt you. And I don't think the Raptors have that much offense to compensate for it. So, I mean, if he comes back on a reasonable deal, like 2 years, like, I don't even know, man, like 16 million. Like, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. But I think he could probably get more elsewhere. So we'll see for Mark. He's 35 years old. With Serge puts up good numbers. I like his culture fit. He's been a good vet to pretty much everybody. Obviously, just a fantastic media personality in terms of just content. But I mean, I think the Raptors clearly preferred Mark over him. So if you're not really going to even pay Mark, I don't know, $10 million a year, how much are you really going to give Serge? I mean, Serge can score efficiently. He doesn't defend as well. Still a pretty good defender. And honestly, Serge probably got a pretty big contract. So, I don't feel totally great about both those guys. I mean, I think for me, if the Raptors can sign these guys to contracts that aren't inhibitive, that aren't going to handcuff them for going forward, that aren't going to tie up your cap space and become negative assets, then I think you just re-sign them. I don't really care necessarily about the rest of the stuff. I think Fred, you just keep regardless, man. I mean, maybe a team comes with like a ridiculous offer and maybe you can't match it, but I think Fred has shown that he's a piece of the future and you're just going to keep Fred. But with the other contracts, it's just like if you can sign them to a contract that can be later moved, then you do it. Because I do think that, these guys are still very competitive. They're still very capable of contributing. And if you can keep an asset, generally speaking, I'd rather keep the asset and then make a trade happen later on and get something out of it than just let someone go for nothing. And so we'll see. Again, if someone comes with a huge contract for Serge or a huge contract for Mark, you just say, listen, thanks for the memories. We appreciate it. You're always Raptor legends. You won a title here. But best of luck, But if it's like a reasonable contract, I'd like the Raptors to keep them. And then with Kyle, I mean, they extended Kyle. So he's on the books next year. Who knows? Maybe Kyle tries to leverage for another extension. We'll see. But I think they probably keep Kyle too. It's just weird. I don't even want to necessarily entertain the idea of the Raptors losing Kyle because he's so fundamental to so much of the Raptors' success and what they do and their identity that, yeah, I mean, you can argue, he's at the peak of his powers and you might flip him now, but I don't know, man. It's like, with the Mavs and stuff, you never heard anyone being like, oh, Dirk's getting old. Maybe we don't necessarily want to run it back with him and Monte Ellis and Jose Calderon. Maybe we flip him for some future assets. They never end up doing that. Or same thing with the Spurs and Duncan. And obviously Kyle's not Dirk or Duncan. Those guys are like clear-cut Hall of Famers, and Kyle's more borderline. But it's kind of the same deal. Like, unless you're blown away with a package, I don't think the Raptors are rebuilding. I think they're going to be competitive next year, and Kyle's going to help them be competitive. So, kind of expect them to keep Kyle too.
I think what it comes down to is, one, the direction of the season, kind of direction of the team, kind of what happens based off what happens in the off season, but more of kind of getting a feel of next year's market as well. I mean, I think we all want Kyle Lowry back, and hopefully, of course, at his age, after next season, of course, at a good, a good deal, worth of a contract. But of course, I feel like, it is possible that he might draw a large amount of interest if he hit the open market. And I think maybe Masai has to kind of gauge that. So we'll see what happens with Lowry, and what do you, and like what will happen there. But regardless of what happens this offseason or next offseason, how do you think Raptors fans will look back on Lowry's time in Toronto, no matter what?
I think just with a tremendous amount of pride, right? Like, I think the reason the Raptors built a statue for Kyle and stuff like that, not even necessarily because he was a multiple time All-Star or that, he won the championship or anything like that, or he has all these franchise records. It's really the reason you would build a championship or a statue for Kyle is because he is the model for like you wish every single Raptors player who puts on that Raptors jersey, who puts Toronto on their shirt, is going to play as hard and care as much as Kyle does about winning the game. And that's because nobody cares that hard as Kyle does. And I remember asking Nick Nurse at training camp. They had hired this coach from the British Basketball League, Fab Flournoy, who was a player coach and honestly incredibly in shape for a coach. And I remember asking Nick just a throwaway question like, hey, what's your connection with Fab? Why did you bring him onto the coaching staff? And he was like, Fab is one of the top 3 most competitive players that he's ever, coached against or coached for. And he was going on about that. And then afterwards, I was sort of seeing Nick and I just walking around the tunnels, and I was like, hey, Nick, who are the other 2 guys? And he said, Kyle. Kyle's the number 1 guy. And there's some other guy, some random player, I'm sure Nick really respects, but we've probably never heard of because he probably played in like Italy or something. But yeah, I mean, Kyle was the most competitive guy a guy like Nick has ever coached. And honestly, like even if you look around the NBA, a guy who cares as much as Kyle is just rare. It's really rare to find. It's the skill, and of course, he's also a really smart player. So I think the way Raptors fans remember him is just with pride, and that he played harder than every other Raptor who was ever put on that jersey. And that's something that we should all expect from the players moving forward, is that, like, you know what, you might not be that talented. Let's be real. Kyle Lowry's not that talented in terms of what he can do and what he can't do. But because of how smart he is, because of how hard he plays, he makes so much winning happen. And yeah, just an unbelievable amount of pride, man. He's, the greatest Raptor of all time, like, period. And
no doubt.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
For sure. I really think he kind of sets the standard of what Raptors basketball and what Raptors culture is all about. And yeah, I love the way you put it.
And given that he was playing in the Canadian market, which is already counted out to begin with by a lot of fans, even a lot of fans in general would always count out Kyle Lowry. And he's been playing with that underdog mentality his entire time in Toronto. And the fact that he's able to rise to the occasion and also thrive and find success. I said this on a previous podcast. I think Lowry's going to go down as one of the most underrated players in NBA history.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely, man. I think any team would love to have Kyle Lowry. And yeah, I mean, he's just it's been really, really heartwarming to see him grow as a player, because the progression of Kyle in terms of when he entered the Raptors, back in 2012, 2013, it was like an accident, man. Like, they wanted to sign to Steve Nash, who was like 38 years old. They wanted to sign Steve Nash instead. And Kyle was the plan B. Steve decides to go to Los Angeles, and the Raptors end up with Kyle. And, he turns into this whole magical player that, has flipped this whole series around, this whole franchise around. The Raptors wanted to trade him in 2013, and he had his bags packed for New York. And instead, that falls through. And it all feels very serendipitous, but at the same time, it feels like we've been through all the struggles with Kyle. When Kyle used to be down, the Raptors used to be down. Then Kyle grew to become an all-star player. Raptors made the playoffs. Then he had to sort of overcome a lot of things in terms of being able to perform in the playoffs. Obviously, that Wizards series 2015 was so terrifyingly bad and depressing. But Kyle fought through all of that, and he made it out the other end. And now he's such a proud, confident veteran. Everyone's singing his praises. And that's kind of how it feels. That's the trajectory of the Raptors, is the trajectory of Kyle Lowry in his career. So, yeah, we're always going to see so much of ourselves in Kyle that, it's going to be impossible to separate that emotion, let alone the fact that he's just a really good player.
For sure. He really has defined this era of Raptors basketball. It really is the Kyle Lowry era.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, since we're talking about the future and just how we're going to look back on things, this upcoming offseason in 2021 is going to be very big for the Raptors for obvious reasons. I can think of two words that come to mind and for why that is. So taking that into consideration, what do you think the Raptors' overall game plan is for the next couple of years? And regardless of what happens with Giannis, do you think if the Raptors miss on him, do they blow it up? If they do get him, what's their plan of action?
I think they're actually in a good spot. If you look at the core 4 young guys, I guess young guys is not even accurate anymore. They're really young vets, but they have a good core moving forward, right? I'm assuming they re-sign Fred. you have Fred, you have Pascal, you have OG that, who's extension eligible as well. And then even Norm, who's on a pretty decent contract and a pretty good player. That's a decent core. I mean, it's not like a core that's going to win you championships on their own. But, if you can add a star player to that in 2021 when the Raptors, obviously they plan to do so, yeah, that could be a pretty good team. I don't really see them blowing it up moving forward. I really don't. I mean, obviously blowing it up depends on who's available in the draft and things like that. But Raptors are a little bit too competitive to blow it up. Like, you would have to move a lot of pieces out of this thing. And if you want to take apart so much of what you built already, then it doesn't really fully make sense. I think in the modern NBA, it makes more sense to stay more competitive. Like, I don't think Boston blew it up in the sense that, like Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett were clearly old, but they immediately sort of bounced back. They didn't really tank for multiple years, like a Sixers style, Sam Hinkie style tank. They didn't really do that. They had one really great trade against Brooklyn that got them, the core now. But you look at Miami, they're in the East Finals now. They never really rebuilt. They just continue to be competitive. They signed guys. Even last year, they didn't have any cap room. Somehow they ended up with Jimmy Butler in a sign and trade. And you see sort of the development that they've been able to do with guys that are young. Houston's another team that's, I guess they're out of the playoffs now, but, they've also never really rebuilt. The Clippers never really tanked either. They just were able to, be bought out by one of the richest men in the world and suddenly become an attractive franchise because they're not owned by a racist slumlord anymore. But yeah, I mean, like, a lot of teams have not opted to go that rebuilding route. And I think the Raptors, I'm not saying that they're going to keep this team in perpetuity. I just think that they have a lot here. They're going to be pretty competitive, so their picks are never going to be that great. And I think they're going to try to continue signing players, developing them, being homegrown, and then eventually, because they've shown to be a winning organization and winning, a talented organization that, I think the Raptors are just going to kind of continue to do what they're doing right now and then just wait for the next Kawhi, wait for another superstar, something like that to come along. And honestly, who knows? Maybe they will,
I'm just thinking about like how, the process of building a team has kind of shifted, especially in basketball, from, building through the draft. And I mean, it still happens building through the draft, but we've seen a shift a lot more towards either trades or mainly free agency, especially. I mean, we see how, the Lakers, once they landed LeBron James, everything kind of changed in terms of their trajectory. And, we see it as well, even with the Clippers this season. So, yeah, I think a lot of it banks on a lot of it. You do put a lot of pressure on the free agency in an off season. And the fact that the Raptors can land Giannis, I think it does, kind of alter the way you want to, think about your future. But I just have another question. We weren't going to ask this originally, but since you were talking about young guys, a coincidence, it just happened. But Terence Davis was just announced to be to make the NBA all rookie second team. So I just want to know what your initial thought is there and what you think the future can hold for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy for the guy. Just a really genuine dude. I think at the start of the year, I remember sitting down with him in training camp, and I was asking him, like, after our interview, just off the record, like, are you going to play on the roster this year? Are you going to be in the G League? And he's like, I don't really know, man. He's just like, yeah, pretty much. I think probably the G League for a little bit and then come in. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then he went and played like almost every single game. And whatever, he got eventually benched because he wasn't very good in the bubble and he, committed a bunch of fouls and Nick Nurse didn't really trust him. But Terrence is a talented player, man. He's he could score. I think he needs to improve his awareness. I think defensively, obviously, in order to play on the Raptors consistently, you need to be able to defend at a high level. But I like his offensive upside. He's obviously athletic. He can finish in traffic. And if he can develop some things like, get better off the dribble in terms of his pull-up three, then he can drive into the rim a little bit more. And just sharpening up some of the things because his skill set is pretty good, man. 6'5", point guard, jumps out of the gym. He's proven to be a pretty good catch and shoot player as well, which is great. That means he can play a little bit off the ball. He can play, he can cut, he plays hard. Even when he makes mistakes, those are mistakes that are a product of him playing hard and the game being too fast for him rather than him being lazy and committing fouls. And he wants to defend as well. He's a coachable guy. Like, I think he's never really made us think about not playing or his minutes going up and down. He listens to the veterans, and just straight up, he's a talented guy. Like, he was one of the standouts, even in the first intra-squad scrimmage game. Like, TD was just like out there and making a clear impact on, like, okay, this guy can really play. So I'm happy that voters were able to recognize him. I know it's hard to win one of these all NBA rookie teams when you are part of a winning organization. Like, I don't think Fred made one. I don't think OG ever made one. I don't think Pascal made one. And so, it's just when you're on a good team and you're a rookie, you probably don't play that much. But voters clearly were paying attention this year. They saw the amount of impact Terence was able to pack into very limited minutes for the Raptors. And yeah, he's pretty damn good. And again, he was undrafted. Like, this guy was playing basketball for the Denver Nuggets in summer league, and the Raptors were like, yeah, we need to sign this guy right now. And he's on the all rookie team. Like, that's fantastic. Yeah. Look at the guys he was there with: Kobe White, Tyler Hero, PJ Washington, Rui Hachimura. Like, some of those guys are like lottery picks. And the Raptors got this guy for free. He's undrafted. So it's pretty amazing.
It just speaks to the Raptors scouting and obviously their ability to find diamonds in the rough. Here's just another one. And honestly, this might be, it very well could pay off, just like Fred VanVleet kind of paid off. Same kind of trajectory there. But yeah, we're about to close out the interview. I just want to, before we ask the last question, I want to, once again, thank you for coming on. It's honestly been an amazing discussion, really fun, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. No, it's been really fun to come on and talk about this. I don't get a lot of chances to talk to Raptors, so it's been good to chat, man. It's been good to chat for sure.
Of course. So my last question is, now with the Raptors out, who are you cheering for in the playoffs?
I got a really good buddy of mine who is a Heat fan, and I don't really know any Laker fans, Clipper fans, or Celtics fans. So I'm going to go for the Heat. They're a fun story, and they've just been very fun to follow this playoffs. I was really impressed with what they did to Milwaukee, and that's a team that no one really expected. There's a lot of Raptors parallels there with the Heat as compared to what the Raptors do. Butler is kind of like a shooting guard version of Kyle. They're very good friends as well. So
for sure. And
I'm going for the Heat, man.
And if you could pick one of the, I guess final 5 teams right now, but if you could pick one, who do you think Raps fans as in general should cheer for? I know there's a lot of people making the argument that, there's some fans that want to support the Clippers and support Kawhi, and some fans don't want to support Kawhi and the Clippers because, maybe a little pettiness there. But in general, is there a team you would choose that either you would recommend Raps fans cheer for?
Not a lot of great options, to be honest. If the Denver Nuggets go through tonight, I definitely cheer for the Denver Nuggets. I actually really enjoy that team as well. But with the Clippers, I wanted to root for Kawhi. I really loved Kawhi and what he did. I didn't really feel mad about him leaving or anything like that. But the rest of the Clippers are just so unlikable. And it's just like frustrating to root for a team that's talented but also doesn't put it together regularly. So I wouldn't recommend cheering for the Clippers. And then the Lakers, the LeBron stuff is kind of obnoxious. I've always, I don't really, I don't want to, come on, man. What are you going to be tweeting about Alex Caruso? Like, no, come on. And then the Celtics, realistically, I hate the Celtics, so I can't really recommend that either. So really, Miami is the only choice, and even Miami's not great.
Yeah.
It's like, even Miami, it's like, okay, so they're one of the contenders for Giannis. Do you really want Miami to play as well as they do? But just on a basketball level, Miami's a really fun story. So.
Oh yeah.
And Jimmy Butler is. I was gonna say Jimmy Butler is one of Kyle Lowry's best friends. So there's that too.
Yeah. Just want to quickly follow up. Since you're saying the final 5 teams are not the most ideal, what would you say is the most ideal finals matchup?
I don't know, man. Maybe Boston and the Clippers. They've played some really nice games this year. Only 2, obviously, but the 2 games they played were really fun. And yeah, so I kind of want to see that go head to head. But to be honest, like, you can't really go that wrong with any of the combos. assuming that the Clippers actually win tonight.
For sure. So once again, we want to thank you for coming on. Those are all our questions, and yeah, really appreciate it. Hope you have a great day, and of course, let's go Raptors one last time.
Let's go Raptors
for the season. Yep.
Let's go Raptors. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you guys didn't know already, William Liu is an awesome reporter for the Raptors. He gives a lot of great insights, and you just heard that in our interview with him. So if you haven't checked out his stuff at Yahoo Sports, you should totally do that.
For sure. I actually think we forgot to drop his socials, but I'll drop it anyways right here. If you guys want to go follow him, his @ is @William_Liu on Twitter. You could check out his stuff on Yahoo Sports Canada. And yeah, it's great stuff. Again, the Raptors Over Everything podcast, which he's the host of, and just a great guy all around. Mm-hmm. And we really appreciate him coming on the podcast. But yeah, I think we'll move on. Michael, I think you had something you wanted to bring up.
Yes. Just before we resumed recording, we just got breaking news, or just rumblings of a potential move. Yeah, rumors are spiraling. Marc Gasol, according to Eurohoops, that's @EurohoopsNet on Twitter, is reportedly considering a return to Europe. Now, I know we were just talking about this before we came back on about Jeremy Lin. Was another potential player in a similar situation that left the Raptors to go back home. Do you think Marc Gasol will actually be returning to Europe, or is he going to be staying?
Yeah, like I was saying, I mean, I thought of the Jeremy Lin situation because just yesterday, Jeremy Lin announced on Instagram that he spent the year in China, but he wants to make a return to the NBA next season. He was going to try to sign with an NBA team, but that situation was, I remember last offseason, Jeremy Lin openly said, unfortunately, he wasn't getting any NBA offers. And Marc Gasol, I feel like Marc Gasol is still an NBA caliber talent. I mean, his defense is still elite, and I know there's a lot of teams. I mean, just look at how he took the Raptors over the top. I think his acquisition in, last season at the trade deadline is the piece that really put the Raptors into championship contention and allowed them to succeed in the playoffs. And I think other teams see that and value Marc Gasol, and I think he could very much get a lucrative contract in the NBA. So, this kind of strikes me, questionably, because perhaps if he really is considering going to Europe, perhaps it's just to be going to home. Maybe he just wants to be there. That often happens. And maybe it's not just about money or just about playing in the highest, the highest level league. It's just about going home. Maybe he feels like he's achieved enough. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, if he wants to go back home, he's more than welcome to do it. He has his ring. He played exceptionally well in his time with the Raptors the last year and a bit. He's getting up there in age. I'm not really sure how much more of his career he's got left of excellent play. I mean, we saw this year was like in the playoffs, there was a bit of regression, but during the regular season, he was still very impactful. But before that injury, which I can't remember exactly when that happened, but that the Raptors definitely missed his defense during that time. He was gone. But overall, I think Marc Gasol, I still think he is going to be coming back for at least another year. If the idea is to bring him back, although the thing is, because he's up there in age, it's more than likely possible that the Raptors let him go, just because they want someone with a little more youth to them. They want to be able to maintain that defensive identity, but have other guys stepping up in their place, because the Raptors bench, we saw a lot of guys stepped up, even though they didn't give as many minutes. And as we saw yesterday, Terence Davis was able to lock home the all-rookie second team. And I would imagine that there's going to be more players such as him getting bigger responsibility next year and beyond. So I think I know Terence Davis is a shooting guard, so that doesn't really make a great comparison. But what I'm trying to get at here is that while it sucked to lose Gasol. I would understand why they'd move him, but I'd also understand why they'd want to keep him around.
For sure. We'll just have to see what decision he makes. Again, these are the rumors that are coming about, but we'll see what can change in the next couple months. But moving on, I do want to talk about before we go on, I want to say that our interview with William Liu was recorded. As you heard, it was recorded just before the Clippers and the Nuggets Game 7, and at that moment, both those teams were still in contention. But now today, we are recording this on Wednesday morning, and the Denver Nuggets defeated the Los Angeles Clippers in Game 7 on Tuesday night. And I want to know your reaction to that, because I think the biggest thing is we know that Kawhi Leonard left the Toronto Raptors to go and contend in Los Angeles. I know he went home, but a big part of it was he wanted to contend. He felt like acquiring Paul George and playing beside him would make things easier on him. And where did it end? Where did he end up? He ended up in the exact same spot as Toronto Raptors without Kawhi Leonard.
Yep.
So
the difference is the score in the game. Like the Raptors game, as we were mentioning earlier, was close, but Clippers and the Nuggets game was a kind of a blowout, pretty much, right?
I want to give a huge shout out to the Nuggets though, and our own Canadian great Jamal Murray, arguably I'd say probably the best Canadian in the league right now. He's been playing absolutely insane, helping lead the Nuggets to two comebacks. They both the first round and the second round, they came back from a 3-1 deficit. So huge props to the Nuggets. They seem like a really exciting team.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think we said this in previous episodes, but Jamal Murray this playoffs has been his breakout performance, and I look forward to seeing more games like this one. And regardless of whether or not the Nuggets are going to be playing the Lakers or the Rockets. Oh wait, is that series still going on?
No. So the Lakers and the Lakers defeated the Rockets 4-1.
Okay, yeah.
And now the Lakers will face off against the Nuggets.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify there because what I was about to say next. But anyway, the Lakers are going to be a very tough test. But if they can pass that one, I don't know. This Nuggets team might surprise people.
Honestly, I think the most 2020 matchup at this point that we can get is the Nuggets Heat finals.
That would actually be so much fun.
That would be very, very fun.
Jimmy Butler versus Jamal Murray would be quite a series. But we're getting too far ahead of ourselves. We need to reflect on what was probably the most embarrassing playoff defeat in the NBA this year, and that's Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and the Clippers boasting about winning multiple championships, and then immediately after Paul George saying, "Actually, we didn't really want to compete this year."
Hey, we love Kawhi Leonard. He won a championship here. And, I would have loved to see the Lakers-Clippers matchup in the Western Conference Finals. But, just like how you said it, I think there are a lot of factors that kind of made that team very hard to mesh. We were talking about it last night a little, but, Kawhi, I think you said it best. Kawhi and the Raptors were like almost a perfect fit. The Raptors are, the underdog, work hard team. They're egoless, and Kawhi Leonard was the egoless, superstar. And now the Clippers, he wanted to go home, and I get all that, but there was a lot of off-court drama with the Clippers, a lot of egos as well. Even with Paul George, a lot of struggles there. I just feel like there were a lot of distractions on that team, and I felt like it definitely even got Kawhi most likely involved. We don't know what happens behind the scenes, but we can tell that they weren't clicking, especially in this bubble, as well as we had thought they would. And, it's just interesting. I'm not even getting to the main question yet, but it's just interesting because this team, the Clippers played like a team that didn't feel like they had to work hard for it. They played like a team that, they had the confidence level was there. They were confident that, they can just cruise by everything. But, that that didn't translate into actually playing well or actually working hard.
Mm-hmm. That's what really frustrates me, because this Clippers team was playing with that mentality that they've won multiple championships, even though this is their first year together. And just to see them that last stage go after that, oh, they can go off just on their talent alone and win the championship with ease. Doesn't that kind of remind you of the Leafs in a way? Like the Leafs have the exact same mentality where they think their talent alone is going to carry them to victory.
Yeah, and I mean, go on.
It was just basically going to say, but clearly that mentality is clouding their judgment and letting other teams that clearly on paper are much worse than them beat them. And that's why you have to look at these kind of situations where you have to be humbled to be playing more like a team. And I think this Clippers team had to learn that the hard way this year. And if the rumors are true that perhaps Kawhi and Paul George leave after next year, which they probably will because they're going to opt out of the last year of their contracts, then what does that say about the Clippers and their pursuit of trying to win a championship? What does that say about the players that they assembled together?
And they threw away
the right fit.
They essentially threw away their future almost. They traded like their next, I believe like 5 years worth of picks plus Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who we know is tearing it up in Oklahoma City. Probably the Clippers' top prospect at the time. So it really puts it a lot into perspective. And I want to keep this segment short, but yesterday I kind of told you about the hot take. I don't think it's much of a hot take, but Kawhi Leonard is a leader, but the thing is he leads more by example. At least how much we see. He is a leader and it is his team, but perhaps I was saying maybe they need, someone like Toronto has with Kyle Lowry, which is a cemented leader, a cemented vocal leader, more so, that kind of can really rally the guys, and can really, embodies that work hard mentality and kind of spreads it throughout the team. Now, I'm not saying Kawhi Leonard isn't that. Again, we don't know how he is, with his individual teammates, but I think Kawhi Leonard works best when he doesn't have to assume the role of best player on the court plus, the vocal leader. I think his dynamic in Toronto was really good because Kyle Lowry kind of took over that face of the franchise role, and Kawhi Leonard was just able to ball,
Exactly.
And I don't know. I think the Clippers have to figure that out because I think it plays into a lot of, like I said, the off-court drama that's happened. And I think they really need someone to kind of really set them straight there. And Kawhi Leonard he's still the greatest player on that team, and he's still honestly a top 3 player. But there were some issues there with, getting that team to get rolling and getting them to actually want to work hard for it.
Exactly. And I think it really just comes down to this. The Raptors on their own without Kawhi are a solid team that just needs that finisher. Kawhi needed that stability and just that ability to just focus on his game and not worry about outside noises clouding his judgment and clouding his ability to do the thing that he's designed to do, and that's to win basketball games. And I think that's pretty much what it is. The Raptors needed Kawhi just as much as Kawhi needs the Raptors. And, if Kawhi does decide to come back, would you accept it? Would you be like, welcome back? It's good to have you back.
Yes, I would. I think all Raptors fans would. And I also think all Raptors fans should have, respected his decision to go home. Because, he was kind of placed into this position here in Toronto, made the best of it, and then did what he really wanted to do. And, I guess his stint there, again, he still has another year, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. But if, let's say, he doesn't win next year and he comes back, it just didn't work out for him. But, he still did a lot here in Toronto. Why wouldn't you want a top 3 player back in Toronto?
Yeah, exactly that.
So I
would love to have him back too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to ask you, should Kawhi have stayed?
You know what? You look at that rumor from yesterday where he said he didn't think Toronto was good enough to compete for another championship. And
just quickly, that was reported by Josh Lewinberg of TSN. He basically said one of the reasons, obviously Kawhi wanted to go home, but another one of the reasons for leaving was that he didn't believe the Toronto Raptors were good enough. So
Okay.
go on.
Basically, what I'm trying to get at here is that he should have stayed, but the way he should have stayed should have played out differently than the way he was thinking of staying. And you probably remember this was trying to get Paul George traded here for Fred VanVleet and Pascal and a bunch of other future assets just to make the team that he wants. And as you know, that team did not really work out in the playoffs this year, and I don't think that's really going to work out unless they really just focus on their issues and just work together as a team. I think, obviously, do you think Kawhi regrets his decision? I don't know. I don't know if he's a guy that has regrets, but I would imagine that I think if he had to redo it, he probably wouldn't have gone about, oh, you have to trade for these guys if you want me to stay. I think he could have easily re-signed for whatever money the Raptors would have thrown at him. And that team could have definitely been in the Eastern Conference Finals right now.
For sure. We'll just have to, we'll see how it plays out next season. I think he just got his whole evaluation wrong, saying that, saying that the Raptors aren't ready to go back to back. I mean, clearly they were good enough to go just as far as the Clippers did. So, we'll see how his time in LA plays out next season. I do think, to be honest, he'll still stay in LA even beyond those 2 years after he opts out. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it plays out.
Things can change in a year. Let's put it that way.
For sure. I want to briefly talk about the WNBA playoffs, which have been very exciting so far. And especially, last night, Shea Petty of the Phoenix Mercury scored that incredible buzzer beater game basket to win the game. That was absolutely insane. And yeah, I just want to know your overall thoughts on it so far. We'll keep it short here.
First of all, I want to just mention that Petty was cut by the Mystic, the same team she eliminated last night, which I think is chef's kiss.
Oh, for sure. Honestly, the narrative behind it is insane. It's what everyone, it's a narrative that people dream of. Getting revenge on the team that kind of waved you. They kind of wrote you off. Yeah.
Honestly, both games were pretty interesting. I thought the Mercury Mystic game was definitely more interesting, to be honest, because it came down to the wire, and then that shot was a perfect ending to that game. The Suns versus the Sky was not particularly close throughout the entire game. I think you could argue that it was pretty much the given outcome because, what was it? The Sun have one of the best defenses in the league. The Sky have one of the worst, and because the defense showed up, basically by the time the Sky tried to make it close, it was too little, too late. So I kind of respect them in a sense, keeping the game close, but at the end of the day, the Suns were too much for them.
For sure. It's definitely going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out. I thought, that Mercury game was just insane. Of course, we all love those nail-biting endings. And honestly, could go probably, for me, goes down as right up there with OG Anunoby and Luka Doncic's buzzer beaters this year. But tomorrow we get some more games. We get Minnesota versus Phoenix, and then we get LA versus Connecticut. And I can't wait to see how these play out. I think a lot more people should be paying attention now that there's a lot more time to watch sports, and rightfully so. I'm so happy to see the WNBA get more coverage on TV, things like that. So it's great to see.
Absolutely, and I think people take for granted just how exciting these one and done games are. I'm not a huge fan of them for basketball because I feel like you need a few more games to at least determine a winner. But honestly, at the end of the day, it still makes for exciting competition. It makes the playoffs that much more important. Every game is super valuable. You have to be on your best for every single one, and overall makes for good quality competition.
For sure.
But I want to mention that we keep seeing this every time big sports media outlets like Bleacher Report and ESPN tweet anything in regards to women's sports and specifically the WNBA. Just the amount of how do I put this? Fans that how awesome women's sports are. You see, oh wow, you posted this, sleeping, don't care. So it's super annoying, man. I just hate it.
I hate that too. I mean, the skill level that they're, putting out there on the court is insane. And it's so exciting. It's really exciting to watch. And I think people just have to, give it some time. They actually have to put their focus on it and actually give it a try, and put the time into to give it a try. And I think they'll like it. Simply put.
I mean, huge props to all the WNBA fans that just tune out those annoying people that just push aside women's sports as like a gimmick, and just be able to support their teams and the sports that they love. Like, honestly, props to you guys. You guys are the reason, the true sports fans that just stick through despite all the criticism or just the doubters out there.
And yeah, I don't think they, in the end, I don't think the WNBA or the WNBA fans need those people's approval anyways. So, we'll keep enjoying the WNBA, and we'll keep enjoying women's sports. Exactly. So,
actually, before we move on, do you want to make some quick predictions for the next two games?
To be honest,
who do you think is gonna win?
I honestly think Phoenix will take the game against Minnesota, but I am pulling for Minnesota because they have a couple Canadians on there, Bridget Carleton, and then Kayla Alexander, who I actually had the pleasure of knowing and interviewing a few times. So I feel like I'm gonna go with Minnesota, actually. I think they're well rested right now as well, and I think Phoenix is just coming off a really big game, but you never know. And then I'm gonna say LA for the LA versus Connecticut game. What about you?
I feel the exact same way. I think the higher seeded teams are gonna pull out on top for this one. I just have a gut feeling about it, to be completely honest. But I think gotta give credits to the Sun and the Mercury. They made great games last night. They definitely deserve to be here. Maybe I think the Mercury Linux game could go either way, but I think LA and Minnesota are going to be moving on to the third round.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really fun to play on Las Vegas and Seattle await them in their respective brackets. So moving on, we'll keep it short because we definitely need to get to our NBA redraft this week pretty soon.
Yes.
But there are some, I'll let you explain it. There are some rumors surrounding the Leafs and Alex Pietrangelo. So can you just break it down for us?
Yes, absolutely. I want to give a shout out to our co-writers at the Leafs Nation. They've been doing an excellent job of covering everything that's been going on in regards to Leaf rumors. Just yesterday, one of our colleagues, Scott Maxwell, just wrote a little piece about how Alex Pietrangelo says that one of his preferred destinations in free agency is the Leafs. And also up there are the Vegas Golden Knights, and Pierre LeBrun also mentioned the Florida Panthers as a potential destination. Honestly, I'm not sure if this is going to happen. I still won't believe it until I actually see it happening, similar to Tavares. I've said this before on other podcasts, but I just don't know how it'll work financially. They still need to make trades before even attempting to sign him. This is probably a ploy by his agent to get the Blues to re-sign him, which I still think is what's going to happen, despite all the lack of negotiation between the two parties. But honestly, if the Leafs can sign him, that would be a huge addition to their back end. We've been saying for years that Morgan Rielly needs a top 2 right shot defenseman. That's who Pietrangelo is. We already know this, but it's just hard for me to see that that's going to be actually occurring. It's just too many variables have to occur for that to play out.
I'm with you there. Honestly, the money, I just don't know how the money will work. If the Leafs do go about, actually wanting to sign him, they'll have to move a couple more pieces just to make the money work. And also, I mean, here's my opinion here, but I don't think, signing him is the way to go for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think they need a much more effective defensive core overall, rather than putting all their eggs into one basket. Or, I mean, I'll say 2 or 3, as in Morgan Rielly, Pietrangelo, and then Jake Muzzin. And then after that, the other half of the defensive core just falls off a cliff, basically. This isn't basketball where 1 or 2 players can dramatically change the course of a team. I think the Leafs should be investing their money into multiple effective defensive players rather than one really, really good defensive player and then, have the rest of it kind of mediocre.
Exactly. It's obviously, like I said, it would be a great move for the franchise to make if they're able to sign him. That would be akin to signing John Tavares, maybe even more so because that addresses an actual need, whereas Tavares is a luxury. But at the end of the day, it's just too hard to pull off. Too many things have to go the Leafs' way for this to work. And even if they do sign him, like, what other moves could you have to make to even make it work long term?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
Signing him would eventually, I feel like, create a few more holes. Actually, then it'll solve one position, but take a few steps back in other positions, right? Just to make the money work. So we'll see what happens. Either way, I think. I think signing him would be a great idea, but I think also if they don't sign him, I do think they're better off. But we'll see how it plays out. I think. It's an interesting situation nonetheless. And before we head into our redraft, I know the NFL started this week. And I just want to get your quick reactions. I mean, I caught a couple games. I was pretty busy this weekend, I won't lie, but I was able to catch parts of a couple games. I want to say, for me, the main game I watched was the Bengals game, and Joe Burrow, I just want to say, looks amazing out there already in his first game, and I think he has a very, very exciting career ahead of him. They kind of fumbled it in a funny way at the end. They couldn't get him the W, but that was just a great game, and I just want to know. I mean, you're a Bills fan, so they won. So tell me, what was your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, for those who don't know, the Bengals lost 16-13 in a heartbreaker.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most hilarious blunders in NFL history, and kind of the perfect way to start off his career, if you think about it. But for the Bills, they won 27-17 to the Jets, and I think that was an all-around great game for them. They played excellent defensively. Their offense was clicking. Stephon Diggs looks like the real deal. I think Josh Allen's passing has improved tremendously since last season, because that's one of the big question marks. Like, will he be able to be a better passer this year? And so far, so good on that front. Not too big of a fan of their play in the third quarter because they let the Jets really get back into it. And I mean, the score looks like they won by 10, but clearly that they had like a late touchdown. The Jets did, so kind of like just kind of a bit of a wash. But overall, a solid win for the Bills. I think a lot of people are predicting that they win the AFC East this year. I still don't believe it until I see like consistent success, and obviously being the Patriots is going to be big even without Tom Brady. But hey, you never know. What about your Browns?
I was just gonna say, don't get me started on on my Cleveland Browns. They suffered a pretty unfortunate loss to the Ravens, 38-6. Pretty unfortunate is an understatement. But we'll see. They play this week against the Bengals, so we'll see if they can bounce back. But I think before we close out this segment, I think the big talk of the week was the Pats and the Bucks comparisons. Of course, Tom Brady went over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Cam Newton joined the Pats. So I want to know what you think, because Brady's his first week performance wasn't that great. Meanwhile, Cam Newton excelled in a lot of ways with the Patriots, and I just want to know your quick reaction to that kind of double-edged sword there.
Well, let's just go off the bat. Who would have predicted that the Patriots would have a much better showing in their first week than the Buccaneers did? But let's be real here. I think this is going to be a very interesting comparison between the two parties. Like, what's the one thing that NFL fans have been talking about for years? Is Tom Brady a system quarterback, or is he just that good? And we'll find out for sure this year if that's the case, because so far in the first week wasn't really a great showing against a really good Saints team. That could have been easily a very close one, but it clearly wasn't. Whereas the Patriots are playing against a basement dweller and a team that's most likely going to be tanking this year in the Miami Dolphins. But I mean, obviously you still have to play your best against every team you play against. And we still know that the Bill Belichick system works. The Bill Belichick system has won God knows how many Super Bowl champions. I shudder as a Bills fan just hearing that, or at least saying that. But I mean, obviously, it's kind of hilarious to see Brady lose the way he did in his first week. I don't think he regrets his decision. It's way too early to tell, but we'll see how the season plays out if Brady was really a system quarterback or just as good as he really was.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So we'll just see how that plays out over the next week and over the season. But I think we'll take a quick break here, and then we'll head into our 2015 NBA Draft redo, and then we'll end off the episode. So we'll be right back. All right, and we're back, and we are about to do our 2015 NBA Draft Redraft. If you haven't been following along on our podcast, we've been redrafting the past few, NBA drafts, and we did before that we did the NHL drafts. So we do from 2010, and we're going all the way up till 2017, redrafting all those drafts, and it's just something fun to do. And yeah, so this week is the 2015 NBA redraft, and I will have the first overall pick, and then Michael will have the second overall pick, and we'll be alternating between us two, and we will be redrafting the top 10 picks.
Yep. And afterwards, we'll mention some honorable mentions, any players that we didn't pick that deserves a nod, of course. Don't you guys worry if any of you are fans of some of the players that we didn't pick. Don't get mad at us. It's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, this draft is really good. There's going to be a lot of quality players in our honorable mentions that haven't gotten picked. This is just a really deep draft. There is star power at the top, and then there is it's just really deep, and it was a great draft. So I guess I have the first overall pick, so I can just get right into it because we don't want to spend too much time on this one. Usually we kind of ramble a lot about players, but we'll just go provide a brief analysis on them. But with the first overall pick in the 2015 draft, I'm going to take the same player who was already taken first overall in this draft, and that is Karl-Anthony Towns of the Minnesota Timberwolves.
I think that was a pretty easy choice. I'm not sure if you're sweating there, having to decide, having to take Cat again.
He's really like the ideal big man to build around. I think Minnesota has that box checked off. He's great offensively, and he's pretty elite defensively too. Of course, he's been, there's been struggles in Minnesota, and I think he just needs that team built around him. And, they have the first overall pick in this upcoming draft, so we'll see what they can do there. But Karl-Anthony Towns has been their brightest spot, and he's a perennial, superstar, honestly. And he has a lot of room to grow still.
Absolutely. I think it's just super frustrating to continually see the Timberwolves continue to struggle year after year, despite having all the talent that they have. And even at one point they had Jimmy Butler, and obviously who knows how much they're regretting that decision. I'm sure it's a lot, but overall, Karl-Anthony Towns is the least of their worries. He's been exactly as advertised since the beginning, an excellent all-around player. And I'm sure a lot of teams, if he was somehow available on the open market, would be salivating at the idea of acquiring him because he's been that good.
For sure. So now you're up with the second overall pick.
And I think this was another easy one. I had to pick this guy who's been balling down in Phoenix, and Karl-Anthony Towns' teammate in college at Kentucky, Devin Booker.
He has been balling, and honestly, I mean, I know we all say he's a superstar, but I think he's still an underrated superstar. It's just the volume, the capacity he scores at is insane. And I think the biggest comparison a lot of people make is to Kobe Bryant, and he's the closest thing we have to Kobe Bryant right now in terms of his play style, and he's very, very good. And it just sucks because he's in Phoenix where they've been struggling pretty much all his career, and he just wants to make the playoffs. And we saw in the bubble just how good he is and just how good the Phoenix Suns are looking. They literally won all their games in the bubble, but unfortunately, they still didn't make the playoffs. And, a lot of people have their gripes about, is that fair? Because, what's the point of bringing a team out if they could win all their games and still not make the playoffs? But that's something else. But, yeah, I mean, just honestly a star power player. And I think, again, just like Karl Anthony Towns, needs a effective team built around him, but he can definitely be that number one guy. He already is that number one guy.
I do want to mention though about that about his play the Suns play in the bubble. I think it just bodes well for their long-term future, because I know a lot of people were wondering if he's even going to be on this team much longer because of just the stagnation and the lack of overall team success. But I think if this bubble proved anything, that this team is right there. They're on the cusp of being a powerhouse in the West. They just need maybe a couple more pieces or just a season to go their way. They're right, like I said, they're so close. And I think as long as Devin Booker's around, as long as they have their core group around him sticking together, this team can one day, and maybe very sooner than you think, be back in the playoff conversation.
For sure. I think if anything, it was a big confidence boost for them. So I'll move on to my third overall pick, and I will take a guy who has literally excelled, I think, expectations coming into the league, and that is Kristaps Porzingis.
That's who I had at number 3 as well.
If we all think back to when he was drafted, Knicks fans did not like that pick at all. Maybe they just didn't know too much about him, but he basically, kind of shut them up, and in a good way. He proved them all wrong and showed that he can, excel in this league, but quickly became their star. And, I'm sure the Knicks would have loved to still have him on their team. But now that he's in Dallas, I think it's a great fit. He's the second man to Luka Doncic, who's, an absolute superstar already in his second season.
Yeah.
And that Dallas is looking like the team to watch, for the next 5 years. Luka Doncic could easily become an MVP in the next few years. And those two can, him along with Kristaps Porzingis can lead Dallas to a championship possibly.
Honestly, I always laugh whenever I watch Stephen A. Smith's immediate reaction to the drafting of Kristaps Porzingis, because that's we were led astray, run amok, but deceived, bamboozled, all that stuff. And just looking at how his career has played out since then, it's always hilarious to me. And it's even more saddening if you think about it, just that the Knicks gave up on him so easily, and for the package that they got back in return, and then seeing what he's been doing in Dallas. Honestly, he should have stayed in New York if they had better management, because he was the face of that franchise for those few years that they were futile. It's honestly sad that the Knicks have been in such a tire fire for the last few decades.
For sure. So you're up with the 4th pick now.
I don't think there's too much hesitation with this one. He's been excellent in Indiana, all-around great player. I've always been intrigued by him, and that's Miles Turner.
Miles Turner, yeah. I had him up there too. Just a great player all around, honestly. Of course, he missed parts of his first few careers, but he really did break through, especially in his 3rd season, like you said, with Indiana. And I think he's really, starting to he's excelled really well and rolled with everything he's been given, and I think Indiana has a great piece in him.
Absolutely. And Indiana is one of those teams that you kind of feel bad for, in a sense that they have all this talent, all these great group of players, and yet for whatever reason they can never get it together in the playoffs. Maybe most likely because of rotten luck or just playing against far superior teams, but this team can definitely compete year after year.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Indiana, I think I think next season as well, barring whatever happens with Oladipo, I think they'll still be a contender in the East for sure, and they can make a deep playoff run, given the circumstances, if the circumstances help them. But yeah, for sure. And I think Miles Turner is a key piece to that puzzle.
Absolutely. So you're up next at number 5.
Yeah. So with my I'm just checking my list right now. With my what number are we on? 6? 5? 5.
We're on number 5.
With my 5th
I'll go
overall
number
pick.
5.
With my 5th overall pick, I think we're seeing the biggest jump in the draft here. I'm gonna go ahead and pick Montrez Harrell from the Los Angeles Clippers.
Nice.
I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about him, but he has been very, very good, especially the last few seasons. Turned into a starter, and has been that kind of that missing piece. Very effective defensively as well. Just a big guy who can also get you buckets, who can dominate on the floor, and he fits in very well with the Clippers there.
I mean, we were clowning a little bit earlier about the Clippers just boasting about how good of a team that they were and then didn't live up to expectations. But say what you will about Montrez Harrell, he's an excellent fit on that team. And I think down in the paint, you need to have guys like him as a good defensive presence. And he still puts up buckets as well, which is really important to have.
Yeah, I mean, and let's not even forget, he was just named the 6th man of the year. So
there you go.
I mean, that says a lot. He can start on some nights, he can come off the bench, and he could still just be just as effective. Multiple 30-point games for him this season, and I think he's a good fit there.
And here's the thing for me. On most NBA teams, he'd be easily their starter. So the fact that he won this 6th man of the year is very well deserving. He's an excellent player.
All right, you're up with number 6.
So I'm thankful that you did not take this guy at number 5.
I was debating to. I was debating to. I know you're going to take.
Yeah, I'm probably going to pick him up at number 6, and that's D'Angelo Russell. Of
course, D'Angelo Russell. Yeah, that's a great choice. And I was going to take him at 5 because honestly, I had him and Harrell, battling the 4 and 5 spots. But yeah, I know I took Harrell. But D'Lo is an amazing talent, and I mean, you could talk more about it, but yeah.
Well, of course, yeah. Although he is the first drop in this draft, he's still an excellent player in his own right. It's unfortunate the way his career has played out in some aspects, like how his time in LA initially ended, and he did bounce back nicely with the Nets. Now he's bounced around from the he was on the Golden State Warriors. Now he's on the
Minnesota Timberwolves.
Like he's been going all around the place. I hope he could just find some stability in his career because he could totally need that. I think it would just give a boost to his confidence. But he's played well throughout his career. Let's not forget that. He's been an excellent scorer, and I think he can definitely be one of the top point guards / shooting guards in his league.
I mean, let's remember, he was before Kyrie Irving obviously stepped into Brooklyn this season. He was the number 1 option on the Brooklyn Nets, and he was an all-star, and he really did will them to the playoffs as a number 1 option. So he can be that guy, and he just needs to look for a fit. Obviously, Golden State just took him because, it was a sign and trade for Kevin Durant. Might as well get a good piece in him, and they wanted to flip him. And they flipped him, and I think he will fit in with Minnesota. Obviously, he's with his best friend, Karl Anthony Towns now. And I think this is the place where he finds a permanent home. And I think that's, like you said, the stability. I think he needs that. And it's unfortunate to see him get bounced around so much. He's been treated more like an asset than a player these last few seasons. But I definitely do think Minnesota is where he will excel, and we know he's an all-star caliber talent.
Exactly. And at 24, soon to be 25, he still has a lot of mileage left in his career. So yeah, I hope he's able to find his permanent home. That is, because I think it'd be his confidence and develop really well.
It would be good for his confidence. So let's move on. We'll round out these picks a little quicker here, just because
of course.
This segment is going on a little bit too long, but
it happens.
It happens with us. But all right, so I have number 7 up next, and I'm gonna take Josh Richardson.
Excellent. That's where I had him too, or at least around there.
Oh yeah, so he's been a very effective player, especially the last couple seasons. I know he joined the Philadelphia 76ers. He had a great season this season, but as a team they couldn't get it going how they planned out. But I still think he's a very effective piece, especially for their team. So we'll see how that plays out. Of course,
Definitely.
the 76ers will be looking to with a new head coach, hopefully reassess the system. But I think Josh Richardson is a key player into their future.
Absolutely. And another great example of the ability the Heat have to unearth quality talent in the draft. We have to remember he was actually taken in the second round by the Heat in this draft. And the fact that he's been able to have such a long career, and in this redraft, he's now in the top 10, says a lot about his development.
For sure. So you're up next with the 8th pick.
Of course, this one was a pretty easy one. I have to take a playoff P on the Raptors.
There you go.
The correct playoff P, and that's Norman Powell.
Of course. So Norman Powell, I think the last few picks, we just saw a huge jump in, their original selection to now. Norman Powell originally taken 46th overall. Now he jumps up to number 8. And yeah, I mean, as Raptors fans will know just how much of a steal that was and how effective he's been for the Raptors. On any given night, he's been able to come off the bench and really, put up huge games when the team needs it. And he's been a really, really solid player for the Raptors. And yeah, it's going to be interesting seeing what happens in the next few years because, he didn't really have the best playoffs this especially, I guess, this series. In Brooklyn, he was lighting up, but it was a very hard series for him to get it going against Boston. But we'll see because he has a record of course, coming out when he's needed. So
absolutely. Honestly, we have to be thanking the Bucks for giving giving the Raptors Powell because that move has turned out very well. He could easily win 6th Man of the Year this year, and honestly, I think if you look at the second round of this draft, it might be one of the deepest second rounds in the last few years. Like, look at how many players so far we've taken in the second round that are already in the top 10 for this redraft.
For sure. All right, so I guess I'm up with the 9th overall pick now. And I'm going to take Larry Nance Jr. from the
excellent choice
from the Cleveland Cavaliers. And yeah, I mean, we know he played very well in his time in LA. Got traded to Cleveland to join LeBron in 2018. And he's still been very effective there, even after LeBron left. I mean, just this season, he put up his career high, averaging about 10 points per game. And, of course, his three-point percentage also increased this season. Last season, he was kind of a slow breakout. I just think he's been improving pretty much every season. And he's a very solid role player right now for Cleveland. And, of course, the success isn't there on the team yet, but he is a bright spot.
Absolutely. I definitely can see him as a 6th Man of the Year candidate in a few years if his career continues to progress the way it has. You need to have guys like that on your team, like guys who can come off the bench, provide solid minutes, solid production, all on both ends of the court. And I think he could definitely provide that in Cleveland. Obviously, right now, like you said, they're not in a great spot because they're still rebuilding. But overall, you can't be too mad at the production Larry Nance Jr. has provided. He's not the least of the Cavaliers' problems. And since he's also from Akron, Ohio, maybe he passes on the torch from LeBron.
For sure, maybe he's the chosen one.
We'll
see. He's still young. All these guys are still young, so we'll just have to see how that plays out. So how about you round it out, and then we'll do the honorable mentions, and then get on with our way.
Of course, yeah. I think this was a pretty easy one. Had to have been another player on the Miami Heat, Justice Winslow.
I had him at 10th as well. Again, just a solid player, and we do know that the Miami Heat have found a lot of success with him, and he's just a good player. He just plays hard. Now, of course, he's with the Memphis Grizzlies though, but again, another young team that's finding a lot of success, and no doubt with him as well.
Oh, absolutely. He's been a solid player his entire career, like a solid bench player at that. And his numbers have been fairly consistent for the most part, with the exception being his rookie season and his third season for a point per production. But you still need guys like that on your team. A solid player overall.
For sure. So now, how about we go into some honorable mentions?
Oh yeah.
So you can start off by naming some of your honorable mentions. I'm going through the list here.
Well, I see two Raptors on this list. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson and Stanley Johnson immediately jump out to me.
Stanley Johnson, I mean, he went 8th overall. I think he's actually the highest drafted Raptor currently, which is pretty insane. But hey, he had some good games in the bubble, so that was interesting to see.
Oh yeah, and DeLon Wright, former Raptor, who's now on I believe Dallas, right?
Oh yeah.
Raptors fans have very fond memories of him, that's for sure.
For me, I'm just looking through the list. One guy I had on my radar on my board was Kelly Oubre Jr.
Oh yeah,
he's an excellent player. Also Trey Lyles, Willie Cauley-Stein, even Jahlil Okafor had his time, and he still plays for the Pelicans, and he's turned. I guess the hype for him was a little higher, but he's still a solid role player. Terry Rozier. I'm just looking through the list. Kevon Looney. Jetty Osman.
76ers legend Jahlil Okafor.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a solid draft all around, honestly.
Honestly, yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think this is definitely one of the deepest drafts we've done so far, and it's sad we only got a couple more left. So what's next? 2016?
2016 and then 2017. And then we'll have to reevaluate a series after that, but we'll see.
let us know if you want to do more series like this for other leagues, or just some for both the NBA and NHL in general. Let us know.
Of course. All right, so I think with that we will close out this episode. I know we've been running pretty long here, but yeah, I mean, we'll see how the playoffs play out. It's going to be interesting. Both hockey and basketball are moving into their Final Four, and yeah. So with that, let's just plug it in our socials. You can follow me at Matt_Rodrigo_ on Twitter.
Me on Twitter at the Leafs IMO. You can also find our podcast on Twitter at Behind the Net Pod, and we're also on YouTube, Behind the Net Podcast, where you can find our bonus episode covering the Raptors Game 7 loss. And as I mentioned earlier, I will link to that in the description for this podcast if you want to check it out. It was a really great discussion. I hope you give it a listen.
Of course. So with that, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys next week.